Hello everyone. I have not made one of these in ages, but today I will be ranking every style judging from my own experiences. Keep in mind that this is just my opinion, and how good a style is completely depends on how the player plays. It does not matter if you are using the most broken style if you yourself does not have the skills to use it effectively. Anyways, I will be starting from scratch since I have not done this in ages. Let's start with the uncommon styles. For basic, it really is pretty basic. It does have a ton of damage potential, I can definitely see it being viable. But overall it really is just a very honest style. So I am putting it on B tier. For long guard, this is a pretty good style as used correctly. Sure, this style lacks the damage, but it's way easier to land attacks with this style because of its reach. Not to mention that its M2s has amazing range. So it can catch people off guard sometimes. Overall, I am putting long guard in B tier as well. For smash, this is basically just basic but with a way better M2. With the addition of feints, even the opponent cannot trust your smashes. Because if they fall for your feint smash, they will have to eat your M1s which deal a crap ton of damage due to it being above average. On top of that, his M2s also does a lot of damage, both to your opponent's block and health bar. So perfect dodging with this style is much more rewarding. And applying pressure with it is pretty easy to due to your insane amounts of block damage. The smash style is a solid A+ style. For turtle, this style is basically just a counter pick to every counter style. But other than that, this style is pretty boring to play and it having the worst dashes in the game also makes it a style not everyone can use. This style does an amazing job at what it's supposed to do though, which is defending. And it's got some great damage despite it being a defense-oriented style. Overall I would put it on A tier. Now for the rares. Let's start with counter. The counter style is a bit tricky to rate since most counter-type styles completely depend on how your opponent plays. And if they completely shut down any type of counter attempt from you, counter's damage falls off completely. But ladies and gentlemen, for counter, despite it being a counter-type style, outside counter damage, it can still deal some pretty solid damage overall, making it a pretty good pick overall. So I would put counter on A tier, since it's just very honest overall. Next up is trickster. I have no idea why no one is using this style, because it is insanely broken at the moment. Having basically infinite invincibility frames is a pretty busted gimmick, and even if the opponent feints, you can easily just avoid it with your dash cancels. This is not even all that the trickster style has that makes it good. The trickster style has one of the highest damage potential in the game, which means both his M1s and M2s can deal some insane damage. And his ultimate does above average damage, which is the same as Ippo's Dempsey roll and Hitman's Flicker Hell. So yeah, this style is definitely A+ tier. Next up is corkscrew. I already talked about corkscrew a lot of times in my past video about matchups, but let's just say that this style is probably the most annoying style to fight because it has the most broken gimmick in the game, which is his insane healing. His healing basically counters most styles and the fact that it has every single good thing Smash has is just the icing on the cake. This style is busted, and this is this video's first S tier style. For Kimura. With the recent buffs, this style has become way scarier because it actually is a threat if you let him hit you. But the downside of this style is that you are forced to be aggressive with it. If you do not go aggressive with Kimura, your slow debuff will start to fade away fast. And being aggressive is a gamble in this game, because you are very vulnerable to counters and perfect dodges. Stat-wise though, Kimura is overall pretty decent so I would put it on A tier. And up last for the rare styles is charge. Overall this style is great, but how you use it either makes it absolutely broken, or just great at best. And I mean what I said, when I said it is broken if you use it in a certain way. So much so that this style has actually been banned on some tournaments. I will make a video on this soon, but let's just say overall this style is a solid A+ style overall. Now for the mythic styles. For Ippo, it's a pretty honest style overall. This style has one of the best damage potential in the game because of its insane damage output on M1s and its ultimate damage being above average. If you are not careful around Ippo, he can easily snowball his way into taking an early stock if he has his ultimate ready. Ippo also has one of the best dashes in the game, making it easy for him to close the distance while also making it easier for Ippo to negate any type of attempts to catch him. Because if it's easy for him to get in your range, it's also easy for him to escape. Ippo is a solid style, so I am putting it on A+. Next up is Hands Low. Hans Low is pretty tricky to rate because it does have the speed and dashes to make countering with it way easier. But, Hans Low's damage potential outside counters is very bad. And I mean very bad. Its base damage is even lower than counter's base damage, which makes him a pretty bad style to pick if you are not able to land counters. And he also takes extra damage if he himself gets hit by counters. Although great for counters, Hans Low overall is pretty weak compared to counter. So I am gonna have to put it on B tier. Next up is Wolf. Is there even anything to say about this style? The Wolf style's White Fang's block damage got buffed in a recent patch, making it insanely good for pressure. And Wolf's M2 is pretty fast, making it hard to perfect dodge. And the funny thing about Wolf is, this style released when dash cooldowns did not exist yet. And it was easily countered by dashing twice, which is how you are supposed to counter the White Fang. And because of this, old Wolf was pretty bad. So to buff this style they made the follow-up M2 instant, making it way easier to land the White Fang. But now that they added dash cooldowns, it's almost impossible to double dash the White Fang, even with styles with good dashes. Wolf's gimmick is a good example of an old gimmick completely destroying new combat changes. And there is another style which falls in this category, but let's talk about that later. Anyways, Wolf is a broken style. An easy S tier. Next up is Bullet. The rework did not do much about this style, but it is still pretty good. Because outside counters, its overall damage is pretty good. I would say it shares the same pros and cons as counter. But unlike counter, this style has bad dashes. But to compensate, the counter M2 damage this style has is the best damaging M2 in the game. And landing even one of these M2s can completely change the tide of the battle. Although it's hard to land, it's always there in the back of your head if you are fighting a bullet, making you feel always on edge when you are fighting a bullet user. I do think counter is better than bullet though, so I am putting just right below counter at A tier. And the last one of the mythic styles is Shotgun. The Shotgun style is pretty good overall. His Shotgun ability is a special ability that is one of the hardest special abilities to dodge, and it has some great poking potential with it too. The Shotgun style also has some pretty good speed on his M1s and M2s, making it a pretty good style to use overall. I would even say that the only thing bad about this style is its glass jaw, which makes him take way more counter damage. But ladies and gentlemen, despite all of these glazing, I would have to put Shotgun at the lowest tier, which is the C tier. Why, you ask? Because right now, if you use the Shotgun ability, sometimes your dash just breaks. Yes, your dash just breaks, making it completely impossible to win with it at all. So the Shotgun style right now is pretty unusable. But if this bug was fixed, I would definitely put it somewhere around mid-A tier. And here we are at the legendaries. Let's start with Hitman. This style is pretty annoying and boring to fight. And I know a lot of people agree with me on this, but why does it have the fastest M1 in the game if its M1 has the most damage in the game overall? Even Slugger has a hard time competing against Flicker Jab's M1 damage, and it's way slower than it. On top of that, his reach is insane. So trying to walk backwards against Hitman is a death wish because they are still going to reach you. I know that if you have way better ping, his Flicker Jabs is not that much of a problem. But most of us has some pretty bad ping. So we are forced to guess when the Hitman is gonna use the Flicker Jab. For me, this style is S tier, just because how good you are against fighting it completely depends on how good your connection is. But if I were to take into account how it works overall, and not just because it's hard to fight against with high ping, I would put it on A+, because overall, its kit is pretty simple. Up next is Slugger. The Slugger style's damage is the best in the game overall, on both his M1s and M2s. Not even Iron Fist can compete with it on the damage department now. His M2's damage is insane now too, making perfect dodging with this style very rewarding. And unlike Iron Fist, he does not take damage himself for landing an M2 that can deal that much damage. And it having much more room to charge his M2 with after the recent buffs, his M2 now has one of the best mix-up potential in the game. Plus his M2 almost has no end lag, making it hard to punish. And his M1s have anti-heal, so you can't afford to be on low block health against this style. What more can you ask from this style? This style is brain dead. This is an easy S tier. Up next is the reworked Hawk. Old Hawk was pretty bad because he could not backdash, but this new Hawk can backdash, making it a different story. And its damage now not being gatekept by counter damage is a game changer for Hawk. And similarly to Kimura, this style is now an aggressive type of style. Think of it like this, instead of stacking up slow with Kimura, it's Hawk trying to stack up his mode. He can't afford to play passive because he loses out on damage from his mode. And as you all know by now, playing aggressively is pretty bad these days. And it makes Hawk vulnerable to counters. And Hawk does take extra counter damage similarly to hands low. So you have to be careful when being aggressive with Hawk. Anyways, Hawk overall is a solid A+ tier, since it does have anti-heal M1 similar to Slugger, making its offense pretty great. Next up is Ghost. Ghost kinda fell off honestly, but I would not say it's bad now. It's still pretty great. Its damage is fine and his Ghost jab is still a pretty dumb gimmick, and his M1s having no highlights is bullcrap too. But now that the Ghost jab is locked behind a meter, it's much easier to know when it's safe to approach Ghost now. So it's easier to deal with the Ghost style nowadays. It's not broken anymore, but it's still pretty good. So I would put in A+ tier. Now for Iron Fist. This style taking self-damage whenever it lands an M2 has always been pretty bad for me. But the amount of damage this style can deal is insane, especially its ultimate. I would say that Iron Fist is just a better Smash style, but Smash does not take self-damage whenever he lands his smash. And Smash has decent dashes while Iron Fist has turtle dashes. Which honestly makes me think Smash is better. That's just my opinion though. Iron Fist does take almost zero counter damage, so that's pretty neat. Overall I would put Iron Fist at A tier. And the final style for today's video, Freedom. This style has gotten some ups and downs recently, but currently I would say it's pretty balanced. Freedom can now actually switch between modes freely, you can even switch to Smash mode on perfect dodge now. But his flicker jabs did get nerfed quite a bit, and its health being below average is always a bad thing. So overall Freedom is pretty strong, especially if you count that Freedom almost has no end lag on its attacks, making almost all of his M1s pretty safe to throw. While also having insane dashes, making it hard to catch. So yeah, if you know how to use Freedom's modes effectively, and if you know how to freely switch between modes at the right time, Freedom is a solid A+ tier style. And yeah, that's my tier list. Do you agree with this list? If not, how would you rate the styles in the game? Feel free to comment down your thoughts below. Anyways, that's all from me. See you guys on the next one, peace.